Hey, Tamara.
Hey, Dave. Are you
Hey.
pulling the slides up?
Oh, yeah. That would be a great thing to do.
Important. We got it. All right. Now that we've got our slides up, hey, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar in this year's monthly webinar series. I'm Tamara Aaronbaeva, and today my friend Dave Comery is going to talk to us about some of the coming challenges around content distribution networks as streaming video, interactivity, gaming, and the metaverse make it harder for traditional CDNs to meet some of the requirements around loads and latency. At Cox Edge, Dave's job is to look into the future with his crystal ball of data and make sure that we're building our infrastructure so that it can meet some of those future needs. So with that, hey, Dave, welcome.
Thanks, Tamara. Yeah, and welcome to the audience out there in virtual land. So thanks for taking the time out to join us today. So just to kick things off and have a little fun, I'd like everyone to think about your favorite streaming TV service. So whether that be an HBO Max or an Apple TV, or if your audio into Spotify, like what does that streaming experience look like today? So Tamara, what what would you say your favorite streaming service is?
You know what? I like to stick with the classics. I've really been enjoying watching The Tinder Swindler on Netflix. So
All
I'd
right.
have to say Netflix right now. What about
Okay.
you?
No, Netflix is great. My personal fave is HBO Max. They have tons of great content. Succession was awesome for those Succession
Okay.
fans in the audience, and just really, I think what you'll find, like whether it's Netflix or HBO Max, like there's all of our streaming experiences today are pretty world class. Like, you know, great content, quality, lots of good content, breadth of content, lots of different device support. Like it's really come a long way um, in since the early days of streaming. So we're kind of starting to get this streaming video thing figured out. But now what I'd like everyone to do is think about what that experience is today and think about like what might you want like a couple years from.
Uh-oh, it looks like we might be having some technical difficulties. Give us just a second. Dave just got too excited about the topic. Give us just one moment here. It's always the danger when you're running a live show. So sorry, everyone. In the meantime, if you have any questions, go ahead and post those in the chat, and we'll go ahead and try to get this back up and running in a moment.
All right.
Oh, there you are. We're back.
Super jinxed it with all that talk about great streaming video
Right. You know
experiences.
what? This was just a way to showcase what that might look like. We totally planned it.
That's right. No, this was definitely part of the pitch here. So if again, kind of fast forward now, we think about those next experiences. Um, we're looking for more engagement, maybe looking for more immersiveness, maybe more community in our viewing experience. So these streaming platforms, while today like the nuts and bolts of the streaming experience itself is getting really good, where are things heading and where can things evolve to? And we kind of have one example of like what this might look like for partnership with Screens that does some of these interactive, really immersive kinds of experiences. So right off the bat, you can see ultra low latency as a key feature to bring to streaming experiences, so that as that ball is kind of dribbling in real life, it's hitting your screen at virtually the same time. That opens up possibilities with watch parties and kind of this interactive community video streaming. It would be no fun if all your friends are, the cliche example, cheering the touchdown, and then like 20 seconds later you see it. You guys all want to enjoy that experience together at the same time. And then even to new kind of commercial or interactive elements like live betting or voting, auctions that might have that need for really tight latency kind of metric. So when you're in this world now, the bar just raised for what your quality has to be, what your latency has to be in order to achieve these really interactive experiences. Another one that's really interesting and coming is VR. So many of you may have had your headsets and sort of tuned into the Olympics this last couple of weeks. So our friends over at Tiled Media powered that experience through the VR app. And what their observations have been is that really fast response times is what's required to make those experiences truly immersive and high quality. So their metric is motion to high resolution latency. So as you turn your head, how is that high resolution video filling into your view screen? So that metric is around 60 milliseconds is kind of the real world measure of how fast that needs to react. Keep that number in mind. It'll come in handy in just a minute. But that extra lower latency, those response times are really what's going to power this next generation of media experiences, and kind of where a lot of folks are heading. So let's look at the landscape of latency. Traditional TV, so back when TVs had rabbit ears or were connected to coax cables, a typical broadcast latency might be 6 seconds. So again, to define latency, we're referring to glass latency is the industry term. That's sort of the glass on the front end of the lens of the camera, the time it takes for the video to come in through the lens, traverse the network, be encoded, delivered, until it hits the glass of your TV screen, or now your iPad or your iPhone screen. So that glass to glass latency back in the day, something would happen on the field, 6 seconds later, you'd see it on your screen. And on the bottom half of this chart, over on the left-hand side, this is kind of where streaming technology started. So as folks were just coming out with streaming apps and streaming video, it would take 30-45 seconds for that glass to glass latency to kind of transpire. And that's where the neighbors would be cheering the touchdown and then you'd be seeing it on your screen a little bit later. But streaming has evolved, right? So those segments, you see those segment size getting smaller and smaller. Now 1 second segments can get to that same about typical broadcast latency that you'd see on a traditional broadcast system. And now we're even exceeding that and going to even smaller kind of segments, chunked segments, or other alternative streaming technologies that are pushing that latency down even further. As you can see from the use cases, this opens up even more live sports, e-betting, auction type use cases. Voice is there kind of for a reference. What voice, real-time interactive communication. VR, that's 60 milliseconds number again, you can see is even off the edge of this chart for the level of responsiveness and latency that you need to support these modern streaming experiences and applications.
Okay, so to put this into a little context, one of my other guilty pleasure shows is The Voice, and they have the challenge of live shows, and they've also got what they call the live save. So you can vote on Twitter or on their app in real time to, save whoever your favorite singer is. So would this really help with that use case?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were in the 30 to 45 second bucket, maybe your favorite voice candidate. I'm not a super big voice candidate, but I know you can totally get invested in your favorites and you want to save them. But until you vote, the decision's already been made, and things transpire and your candidate's off and you've lost the ability to vote and help them, like that would be kind of your life in a 30 to 45 second latency world. But as these latencies kind of come down, reduce, now that real-time feedback can come back. And, is 1 second or 5 seconds enough, for that scenario? Probably yes, right? Like they're not going to tally the votes that quickly. But when you're talking about, real-time betting, real-time auction, or something that's super interactive, I want this character to go left or right, or something like you're going to need those super low latencies and kind of real-time latencies, as we would say. So the requirements for streaming, we've talked about it's evolving. The bar keeps raising. We say this threatens to create a usability gap, kind of like when are new technologies usable? Is VR usable today? Yes, it's usable. Can it be better? Yes, there's like plenty of room to get even more resolution or interactivity into these experiences. So streaming is still growing. We know it's not slowing down. If anything, there's more streaming going on all the time, everywhere. Just ask my son and his TikTok videos. Streaming is on the rise, and it's here to stay. So really having that scale out architecture in place is super important. When we talk about those higher fidelity video formats, so not only just is the latency getting better, but now the actual number of pixels. So if you think about your living room TV today, might be a 1080. Well, my living room TV is a 1080p. So that's one screen's worth of pixels. For that to become a 4K experience, now I have 4 TVs worth of pixels kind of squished down into the new format TVs for 4K. Take that to 8K. Now you've got 4 4K TVs kind of tiled together and smushed down into a TV format. That's 16 streams worth of like regular video that now has to be transmitted to get to these higher experiences. And even with like VR goggles, now you're talking per eye displays, 4K, 8K, double it up, built with 2 eyes. So you got to have 2 different, kind of visual streams entering those headsets. So the bandwidth is increasing. It's not slowing down. Yes, there's great compression technology out there, HEVC, H265, that's going to help this problem. But we're going to continue to see this trend of higher bandwidth, higher fidelity experiences. And then kind of lastly, this expectation around quality, around interactivity. Today, the interactivity is, fairly light. The interactive applications back in the day were, people were still figuring this out. But as we learn as a, production community how to better produce interactive elements and interactive experiences, this low latency element is going to become even more important as that kind of evolves. So, we believe that, edge technology, all the rage in the industry forums, edge technology is where a lot of these transformations can happen. It's really kind of the most close to the end user and can support the experiences evolving. So let's talk about a little bit about where we are with traditional CDN, and then kind of how edge can help, because edge sounds great, but what does it really mean, right? So a traditional CDN setup might look something like this, where you'd have an origin hosting your content, you'd have a CDN that's built caches. Those caches would connect via the internet term is a peering connection to a last mile provider. So the last mile provider is the one that's providing your internet service. Again, like this ecosystem works really great today for lots of the modern streaming experiences that you're getting. But there are sometimes some higher latency. There's some single points of failure. You mentioned in your Game of Thrones example. Hopefully, a lot of those are getting patched up now, which is great. But origin egress fees, so there's a cost of kind of traversing these multiple layers. Your CDN is going to have delivery costs associated with it. And anytime you're going through another networking layer, there's chance for congestion. There's chance for bandwidth running out. can you scale to a peak? So we look at this and we say, well, how can edge help? So by simply kind of moving that caching a layer deeper in the network, you're going to improve your latency. You're going to more distribute your architecture. So now you're in more places closer. We call it the eyeball network. So you're closer to more eyeballs. You're going to improve your cost of delivery. And you're going to get access to that last mile kind of full bandwidth. There's really nothing between you now as an edge cache and your audience. It's just pure speeds and feeds, kind of whatever that physical connection can support. You're now tapped into that level. And another aspect is kind of co-placing compute resources alongside caching. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We have a follow-on webinar in a couple of months where we're going to dive more into compute capabilities and how that can really change, we think, streaming technologies. So lots is changing, lots is coming to the edge. Now, the one problem, go ahead. Do you have a question, Tamara?
Yeah, so I know one of the things that we were talking about earlier before this was the pure devastation I felt a few years ago when I was watching the Game of Thrones finale. We were using HBO Go, and there was a huge failure, right? It couldn't load, we were missing out. And I know sometimes that happens with releases of new games, things like that. So is this going to be able to help with some of that when we think about kind of the future of CDN?
Yeah, absolutely. So so Edge Cloud is going to improve quality, but it's also going to provide another outlet, or we call it like a redundancy in the delivery, the end-to-end delivery chain. So really kind of where we're going with this is looking is how can Edge plug in with other CDNs to kind of complement a full end-to-end ecosystem of delivery, so that things like a high-profile outage isn't dependent on a single CDN player, a single delivery chain, and kind of build some diversity. Now, the good news is there's been a lot of progress made in the last number of years to address situations just like happened in Game of Thrones, primarily through multi-CDN technology. Now, multi-CDN is also going to help. The other issue I was about to mention about Edge is that it's not everywhere yet today. So there are pockets of where Edge exists and these compute and this capability is there. There are other pockets where it's not there. So what do you do if you're looking to adopt Edge technology? Well, the best plan would be if it's there, use it. If it's not there, then fall back to kind of traditional CDN approach. And the way folks do that is through multi-CDN. As I say, this has been around now for a number of years. The craft has been progressing. And the way folks use multi-CDN is typically to have a number of redundant CDN players participate and help deliver all of the content providers' content to all of the eyeballs. It just so happens there's kind of two ways that you figure out how, which CDN is going to be the best. One might be business-oriented rules. So things like, what geography am I in? What's the cost of this delivery going to be versus, say, the content value that I'm trying to deliver? Are there some trade-offs I want to think about there? What are the contract commits that I might be under? So CDNs, typically you commit to so much traffic that you're going to deliver, and you get a certain price for that, so you have to use it. So intelligently managing your commits and making sure you're using CDN A versus B versus C, that all comes under the umbrella of business intelligence and kind of business rules for making CDN decisions. Then the other side of the house is going to look at streaming KPIs. So these are the real measurements. So RUM up there stands for real user measurements. So these can be driven from real user measurements that are, how much buffering am I seeing? Am I seeing playback failures in this part of the population? What do the bit rates and the upscaling look like in this part of the population? Am I getting streaming failures? What's the startup time look like? All of these KPIs, content providers closely monitor, and can tell from one CDN to the next CDN at any given time which CDN can deliver the best experience for a particular user. So you take these business rules and then these quality performance rules, put them together. Now you can influence streaming decisions and basically like pick the optimal CDN for any given case, and then utilize multi-CDN switching technologies, which can be DNS based or manifest based, or maybe built right into the player of how you kind of switch between CDNs. And now you can really optimize for any given person in any given location at any given time. What is their best choice for delivery? What technology is going to get that to them the best? So that's where we see Edge CDN coming in as a complement to global CDNs. So kind of breaking this chart down a little bit, global CDNs are global, right? They're everywhere. You've got servers in many different countries, many different locations, kind of all over the world. So there's always a good choice for a server to connect to get your content. But the question is there sometimes a great choice available? So when there is an Edge CDN that's local to your network, we call that direct ASN connectivity. So ASNs are how the kind of the zip codes of the internet. Each service provider has their own assigned ASN. So when you're within an ASN and that ASN or that service provider has an Edge CDN available, how can I engage that? How can I take advantage of those capabilities? And that's where my multi-CDN switcher can say, oh, you're on ASN 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's this Edge CDN. Let's switch over there and pull the content from that. Let's measure my KPIs. Let's validate that I'm getting better performance from this versus, say, using an off-net type of approach to my CDN. And that self-reinforcing feedback is going to help, again, guide the users to the best and optimal CDN for any given situation. Sort of in the middle there, hybrid CDN is sort of a term kind of we coin where it's both an Edge CDN and a global CDN. So some Edge CDNs, kind of shameless plug for Cox Edge, have both that Edge delivery capability, but then also can deliver content on a global basis as well. So it simplifies a little bit on the configuration to hit both those use cases, but still placing that under the umbrella of a multi-CDN switcher is how you're going to optimize the performance for all of your users, regardless of kind of their location. And with that, can Edge solve the content usability gap? Usability gap, we mean, are my experiences going to be usable and friendly? Is it going to feel nice and low latency, responsive? And we believe it does. We think that placing that Edge infrastructure within the last mile opens up opportunities to not only reduce the cost, but again, improve the peak scale bandwidth available, give you kind of raw access to that last mile, improve the KPIs of delivery, and kind of this personalization angle, which we didn't talk about too much, but that'll be a topic we hit again when we come back in a couple months with our follow-on webinar. Video, as it gets more personalized, means individual streams, which, as traffic engineers in the audience probably know, the more individualized streams, that means more bandwidth being consumed. So how can I truly have personalized ads or that interactivity or that personalized content, those composable experiences that we kind of talked about at the top of the webinar? How can I realistically think I'm going to be able to deliver and scale those experiences in kind of a one-to-one video world? So we think moving the caches to the edge is a strategic play. The network and the last mile is kind of where the vantage point is going to be for delivering these evolved user experiences. So with that, I'll wrap up. And Tamara, did we receive any questions?
Yeah, we had a few submitted over. And guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. If for some reason we don't have a chance to get to all of them, then we'll include those in a follow-up email where we'll share this recording and the assets as well. So go ahead and ask that. The slides will be included in the blog post as well. Okay, so Dave, let's go to our first question here. So are there any specific technologies that would enable future streaming use cases like VR and 4K, 8K streaming, which you talked about a little bit earlier?
Yeah. So on specific technologies, so I mentioned a couple of those in the slide with the latencies. There's a tech out there called Chunk CMAP, which is really talking about using portions of a segment as they come in that can help take some latency out of the whole equation. I showed WebRTC on the chart. So traditionally, WebRTC is a video conferencing technology, but it's been found that it's also super handy for low latency streaming. Now
Nice.
the challenge, so the challenge is that WebRTC is not a traditional HTTP-based CDN delivery mechanism. It uses other protocols. So the CDNs have to adapt. And again, that's kind of where edge compute can kind of fill in some of those gaps to kind of be sources for some of these newer protocols. VRs, I mentioned like the tiled media use case where that streaming tech is really based on where you're looking in the field of view. That's where your high quality, they call them tiles, are gonna come fill in your front and center viewpoint, while the periphery can be lower quality. So it's really a very adaptive type streaming approach, still taking advantage of traditional streaming protocols, but used in a new and unique way. So yeah, definitely new technologies coming out, and I think again, having a flexibility at the edge to adapt to these new technologies quickly is going to be pretty important.
Got it. Okay. We have time, I think, for one more question. So there have been several high-profile cloud outages recently. We won't talk about who. Is this a problem that multi-CDN can help overcome?
Yeah, so cloud is a little different than CDN. So multi-CDN is specifically talking about content delivery. Cloud technology, it's more access to my virtual machines and my compute that might be in the cloud, my services that are running there. Now that said, the writing's on the wall, I think, for cloud. So as more of these high-profile cloud outages happen, they seem to be trickling in. I don't know, something in the air these days. There's a couple of them floating around, but as that continues to happen, I think we're going to see a rerun of the multi-CDN evolution happen into a multi-cloud evolution. So in the same way that folks have figured out that multiple CDNs can enhance delivery overall by having different options available, kind of backing each other up, multi-cloud is going to have that same transition. Indeed, it's kind of already happening out there. Lots of people are engaging multiple clouds to support their applications, but that's going to get easier over time as the developer tools are improved and so forth. So yes, same concept, different technology, but absolutely multi-cloud and multi-CDN are at the very least, close cousins.
Okay, and it looks like we've had a couple more questions pop into the chat, so I think we can take a few more minutes to answer those now. But just if you're interested in learning more about Cox Edge, if you want to actually experiment with a CDN at the edge, it's really easy. You can start spinning up workloads in minutes. So go ahead and visit us. We've got a ton of free trials, credits, promos. We've also got a program just for startups, so please go ahead and check those out. Let's go to the next question from Tim. How mature is the multi-CDN conversation? Is it safe to assume that the major streamers are already doing this?
Yeah, To answer the question, it is mature conversation. It's not a new concept. Major streamers are pretty much all doing this. It just makes sense, right? It's a diversity of your supply chain in some ways. It's a diversity of just the winds of the internet. Different companies are connected to different, internet peering points, and there's always going to be some congestion that bubbles up or some anomaly or fiber cut, and just having options to reroute around that. It's kind of table stakes if you're running a major streaming service today. So, much the way like Edge can like fulfill particular area of delivery. If a hiccup happens there, you fall over to global CDN. Likewise, global CDN fails and you have a hybrid CDN, you can fail over to that. So mixing and matching and allowing these things to fluidly stand in for each other just makes sense. And yes, it's commonly used.
Okay, yep. Great. And then one last question from Don. Are you deploying micro data centers?
Yeah, so great question, Don. So any and all types of edge compute, I think you'll see coming into the industry. I'll refer you to kind of our plans and our roadmaps that are publicly available. But if you want to have a conversation about where Cox Edge is going, specifically around the topic of micro data center, I'd be happy to take that one up with you. So appreciate the question.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Dave, for helping us kind of peek into your crystal ball of what's happening in the future. And thank you all for joining us. If you have any other questions, go ahead and send those to us and we can include those in that follow-up, as well as the slides, which we'll be sharing, and the recap. And like I said, if you're interested in talking to us more, if you want to check out some of the offerings that we have, please visit us at coxedge.com. There's a handy dandy QR code that you can scan that'll take you right there. All right. Thanks so much again, everyone. And thank you, Dave. Have a good one.
Thanks, Tamara. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Appreciate it.